Hayley, can you take us back to when you were 14 and what happened to you?
Yeah, so at 14 years old, I was diagnosed as having basically gone through my menopause and was postmenopausal. At 12 years old, I started my periods and they were fine for a year and then they just stopped. And I started suffering from some of the typical menopausal symptoms, which are hot flushes, night sweats, poor concentration. And these were happening like every night and every day while I was at school, really. So I then said to my mum that I felt weird, and she said, "What do you mean you feel weird?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't feel like myself. Like I don't feel ill, but I don't feel right." So we went to the doctors, and I was sent for a blood test, and the blood test obviously showed up something because I then had a letter asking me to go and see the gynaecologist. And the gynaecologist done an ultrasound which revealed that I have a womb that is very small and that they could only find one ovary, and that the ovary that they found basically didn't have any eggs in it. So I was diagnosed at 14 as postmenopausal.
But what language did you have to ask? Some very, or maybe your mum, I don't know, have to ask the doctors and specialists some very basic questions so there was a full understanding of your circumstances?
So the way that they described it to me when they diagnosed it was, say, my mum was really upset and she was crying, and say at 14 years old I didn't really understand what they were saying, and I just kept reassuring my mum, saying, "It's okay, mum, I'm all right, like, I'm okay." And my mum was like, "Is this my fault? Is this something that I've done?" And they said, "No, like the thing is, she's not going to realise what it means really, because it's not as if she's trying for a child like at 14 years old." So that was sort of what I took away from my appointment that day, that menopause was that your period stopped and you were no longer able to have a child sort of biologically. Wasn't explained of any of the symptoms or anything that I was going to experience over the years to come. I just was sort of told that I needed to go on HRT, hormone replacement therapy, for osteoporosis, like to protect my bones, and that I was going to be having an artificial bleed every month just in case I wanted to try IVF egg donation later on down the line. So that was to keep my womb sort of healthy. And saying that's literally the only aftercare that I've had.
So how did you get through? How do we phrase these questions? I was going to say, how did you get through your teenage years, or was it like that, or were you just an ordinary teenager?
Yeah, just an ordinary teenager, really. Like I say, I didn't tell anyone what had happened to me because at that age I didn't really understand it all myself. Like, I knew that I was obviously different to other people, but I didn't want to raise attention or draw attention to myself with it. So I just carried on, because I still had a monthly bleed every month. So I still felt as if I was a normal teenager sort of growing up. Like, still, when my friends were saying they were having their periods, it was like, yeah, me too. But obviously I knew it weren't a period sort of thing. But yeah, I just got on with it. I didn't want to miss out on going out with my friends or anything, although I was obviously pretty tired like a lot of the time because of obviously what menopause does to your body. I just sort of worried through, really.
But did there come a time as we move on your years where there's things, aren't there, in life, like for example friends getting married, friends having babies, and was there a moment you had to people? Did anybody actually mention it to you, and you had to say to them, explain?
Yeah, so I did tell a few friends as I was getting older, because obviously that is the thing, isn't it? People expect you to have a baby basically when you're in a relationship or whatever. So I did tell a few people, just so, and also because I just needed to unburden it a little bit, so I had so much sort of hidden inside. But it didn't really hit me, I don't think, until I was sort of mid-20s, when a lot of my friends started to become pregnant, and then I realised that it wasn't going to be like that for me, really. There was a lot more involved in it. And then because I had already grieved as such for like my loss of fertility, I decided for myself I didn't actually want to try IVF, because I already grieved, and you went through a stage feeling as if you were a failure, like a failure as a woman, like not as myself, but as a woman, I felt like I'd failed because I was unable to have a baby naturally. But yeah, I'd already grieved, and I didn't want to go through IVF and then it not work, and then I'd have to go through that stage of feeling like I'd failed again. So yeah, IVF for me just wasn't an option really.
Did you have coping mechanisms, or did you just try and cope as things went along? Or did you feel you needed coping mechanisms? Is that too dramatic a term? I don't know.
No. So I was referred for some CBT classes because I said to my doctor that I was sort of feeling quite down and that about it. But I went to one class and I thought, this just isn't for me. This isn't what I need. I just need someone to sort of just listen and understand me a bit more. So like say, unfortunately back then I was not pointed in any direction of like support networks or anything. So like nowadays there is a network called the Daisy Network, which is for ladies who have suffered from premature ovarian insufficiency. So you can sort of, and with social media like Instagram, there's so many people on there now documenting their journey that you can sort of find your tribe of ladies and people that you can relate to, really.
And you'll probably cut off my next question. Is it more common than you thought from the age of 14? But even in the last few years, you've realised that it's fairly relatively common.
Well, the figures are it happens to someone in their teens. It's 1 in 10,000. So it isn't obviously that common because like when you've got endometriosis, I think the figures for that's like 1 in 8, I think, or 1 in 10. I'm not 100% sure. So obviously it's a lot more uncommon, but there is a lot more people now sort of turning to Instagram and that to get the support that they need. Because for me, I think because I dealt with it from such a young age, I've just learned to cope and deal with it, really. And that's just been my life. Like, I've grown up longer post-menopausal than I was before. So I think it's harder for ladies nowadays when they're probably trying to have a child and then they find out that they're just not falling pregnant and then they find out. So I think for them to have the support network and ladies that they can talk to is a lot easier for them to sort of realise they're not alone, really.
And now you're very passionate about raising awareness, aren't you?
I am, yeah. So I've set up an Instagram page where I am documenting all, say, symptoms and that I've experienced over the years, because I've got 26 years experience, so I've pretty much had every symptom going. Because what happens is a lady actually goes through perimenopause before they actually reach menopause. Like, menopause is really just one day of your life. That is when the day that you hit the 12th month of not having your last period, then that's the day that's the day you reach menopause, and then from that day onwards you're classed as postmenopausal. But say the lead up to that day of your 12 months, you will suffer from perimenopause, and that is where a lot of symptoms happen that you obviously don't realise that they're all related basically to your hormones.
And we just mentioned earlier that I think you did a podcast to New Zealand. And are there different approaches and different infrastructures in different countries?
Yes, there's a lot. I've done a podcast as well with Abu Dhabi, and say their lack of knowledge over there is pretty poor, to be honest. So it's sort of raising more awareness so that ladies can sort of challenge their medical sort of teams and that more with educating them. Say in the UK it really isn't very good. Like, unfortunately GPs have so much to learn, and menopause is just a little part of that. And with the population being 51% female, they need to certainly learn a lot more, because a lot of these ladies that are going to the doctors are given antidepressants and told to just go away, and that's not what they need. They need to be on the hormones that their body is obviously no longer producing.
You recently celebrated a significant birthday. Does it define you though? You don't introduce them. I'm Hayley Cockman, and by the way, I menopause at 14. Is it just part of your life, but it doesn't necessarily define you?
Yeah, I've never let it define me, and I've always hid behind it because I suppose I felt a bit ashamed of myself because of it. Because everyone you meet are like, oh, when are you going to have kids? Like, you've been married for years, like, it's just part of everyone's when they meet you. Like, my customers at work, they're like, oh, hey, have you got any kids? When are you going to have kids? It's just people just seem to just think it's a normal thing. They don't actually maybe think before they speak and realise that obviously life isn't as easy as that for everyone. But no, I haven't let it define me at all, to be honest. And now I kind of had something that's been so negative in my life growing up into something positive. So the more I can help raise awareness and help others, because a lot of people my age, menopause is far from their brain at the moment, but when they do start experiencing the perimenopausal symptoms, it will all sort of start making a bit more sense to them. And it's also raising awareness for parents that this could actually happen to their daughter.
So finally, what is your message to the 14-year-old in Harlow or wherever who might be in the circumstance, and what is your message to their GP?
To recognise, the symptoms. Don't ignore someone when they're presenting these symptoms to you, basically. Just say a quick blood test really should give you the answers that you need, really. And just for this 14-year-old girl just to not feel like they're alone, like there are people out there that are able to support them, really. And say the last thing I want is to think that someone is suffering alone, really.